What Child, performed by Ninjaloot, is available on iTunes, Spotify, SoundCloud, and YouTube. To contact Ninjaloot, head to the official Ninjaloot Music on SoundCloud, YouTube, or the Ninjaloot group on Facebook. Permission granted by the band.
It's time for Push2Plat, your weekly trophy podcast with Mindy and CJ.
What child is this who lay to rest on Mary's lap is sleeping, whom angels greet with anthems sweet, while shepherds watch are keeping. This is Christ the King, whom shepherds guard and angels sing. Haste, haste to bring him love, the babe, the Son of Mary. Why lies he in such mean estate, where ox and ass are feeding? Good Christians fear for sinners here. The silent word is pleading. Nails pierce shall pierce him through. The cross be borne for me, for you. Hail, hail, the Word made flesh, the babe, the Son of Mary. So bring him incense, gold, and myrrh. Come, peasant king, to own him, the King of kings. Salvation brings. Let loving hearts adore him. Right, now so
Hello, listeners, and welcome to episode 44 of Push2Plat. That's right, we are back in the numbers. 44. Wow, it feels like 43 was literally a year ago. And literally, it was. Now, the man I'm going to speak to today, I must say, listeners, I was shocked when I looked at our little Discord back and forth, which is very one-sided. It just consists of links, I noticed as well. But the last time we recorded something was in October, which feels like a travesty. I know we communicate via text and messages and things like this, but a shocking travesty on my part. So I must welcome you today and ask, how are you doing, Sir ResidentDarrell?
Ah. What's up, nerds and dorks? What's up, CJ?
I see some things never change.
It feels like it's been a decade since I've done this on the show.
Well, I notice you don't always do this on your show. So is this something now you're saving for guest appearances?
Well, so the way it works is with the Loot Bros podcast, our show, we do a toast. We actually find something to celebrate, and that's kind of where the stupid slurping and the popping of the can, originated. And so whenever I was doing other shows or guest appearances without the guys, I didn't really feel like it was right to kind of steal our bit for something else. So I just, instead of, hey, let's have a toast, let's celebrate something in gaming or something in life, whatever. I was just like, let me just pop my can, slurp it to be obnoxious to start the show off, to really set the tone. And it's just kind of worked. If it wasn't for the people saying, I don't like when you do that, I would never do it again.
I like it.
But it's whenever. Now, I say this, if one of your listeners or one of my listeners, someone who was just an average everyday person who was like, hey, that's not my favorite part of the show. Just like nice, and saying like, just here's some general feedback from someone who subscribes, I would take into consideration. But when one of my friends or someone I'm close to says, man, that drives me nuts, and I skip it, then it's like, okay, now I have to be creative and I got to find a way to get you. It's almost like it's a game. And I told the story in our last show. We had one of the guys who listens to our show. He's a great dude, becoming a really good friend of mine in real life, not just listening, through the show, or whatever. But he was like, I hate the slurp, so I always try to fast forward to dodge it. So we popped our cans, we gave our little dumb slurp. Here's our toast, and then we went back like 3 times, just being obnoxious later on. And I don't know, it's all in good fun. So most people probably hate it, but it makes me laugh. So that's where we're at.
Perfect. Now, look, I know you have this fascination with reading your trophy count. So, look, I'm going to give you the opportunity. You will be the first person on this show to read their numbered trophy count. So I think that's an incredible honor for you, sir. And I'm going to let you do it now.
Wow, I'm flattered, CJ. So let me kind of clear my throat. Let me crack my back. I am a level 45 with a total trophy count of 10,117 and a platinum count of 187. Man, it feels good to say that.
It does, doesn't it? Yeah, I should etch it in the walls here now. As the first time we've done that. I think that is fantastic. Now, the other thing that I have to ask you, because this has become a thing apparently, although I think it's fairly self-explanatory for you, but it is in the rules and stipulations that have been left behind for me. What is the origins of your PSN username?
Okay, so my original PSN username was God, what was it? Mudzilla or some junk like that, or maybe it was my gamer tag for Xbox. I don't know. I had some dumb name, and then we'd be in like multiplayer matches, and like people would try to call you by your gamer tag or whatever, and I was like, man, I just want my name in there. But like obviously all of the Darrells were taken. I'm a huge fan of Resident Evil. So I was like, oh, I'll just kind of combine the two, ResidentDarrell, easy enough. And then so when I'm in a multiplayer match, which I don't do that much these days, but used to do, someone can actually call me by my name. And it didn't have to be like Darrell 7789148, whatever. You know how it is sometimes when you go to put your name in something and 5,000 people before you have taken it.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, I like that. See, I know that you like Resident Evil, but see, and I know that we have this back and forth. You can't say my name, so we're even here. I feel, but the donk. But whenever I see it, I emphasize the resident part of your name, ResidentDarrell. So every time I turn on the system, I just expect you to be on and be there. Like you're the establishment, if you like. You're there. Yeah, that's right. And I mean, there are certain people on my list like Ike that are always on. Like the 24-hour man. But you're maybe not in that position yet. But it is. It's I don't know. It's encouraging. If I don't see you on there, I might hide offline or something because the ResidentDarrell is not home. But I like that. Now you've already dropped about your podcast, so why don't we go there? This is the wonderful Loot Bros. You're on a third time. That's correct now, isn't it? You're back here. This is it. This is the third swing. At the
third time's a charm.
It really is. And look, why don't we start off with your title this week's episode? This candle smells like my vagina. So now, when you tell me you write the show, I'm assuming you wrote this. So how did this article how did you come across this? How did it reach out and grab you as a topic for the show?
When you smell success, you just kind of have to run with it. So, no, what ended up happening is we used to have a segment on the show years ago when we first started podcasting. We very much emulated the things that we liked about podcasting.
Wow, this conversation could go in an interesting direction here.
Yes. And so what we did was we had like a little news segment, and then we tried to come up with like funny little tags or little catchy monikers for things. And our segment was called News for Noobs. And so it was just one of my co-hosts' way of like, let's talk about some things that are current, we kind of know what's going on, to give us a conversation starter and a conversation point. Well, we all agreed that you don't come to the Loot Bros because you want to be informed on what's going on in the video game industry. We're a bunch of idiots from the South who spend more time talking about their genitals than we do anything of any importance. So News for Noobs got shelved, and it was one of those things where like, we want to bring it back, but we just don't want to talk about like real news. So when my co-host was like, hey, I want to talk about really absurd and crazy things, at the beginning of the show, just to kind of set the tone for where we're going to go the rest of the show. So I was like, sure, man, find something that you think is interesting, and then boom, we'll do it. And I didn't realize he was going to find Gwyneth Paltrow's vagina scented candles as.
So this is a real thing.
It's a real thing that she has he's finding
fantastic
real news stories, if you want to call them news, real stories that are quite absurd. And this past week, he told us about Gwyneth Paltrow's vagina scented candle brought to you by a company named Goop, which is disgusting. So it's just really gross.
It's just there's many things here, but yeah, that's amazing. I have not finished your current episode. I noticed that you're starting to extend the length of your appendages there on that show. So it's becoming more and more difficult to finish it in a day or two for me, because as you know, I peak very early and quickly. But look, I'm interested in that. And listeners, unfortunately, this is not a visual medium, but if you have a moment, I'd suggest, now you'll have to correct me here, Darrell, if I'm wrong, but I believe it's on the Loot Bros Facebook page. There's a delightful picture there of Gwyneth and then her gynecologist there, who I think is also a member of your show. Perhaps I didn't know that about
That's
him.
correct.
Birthing the candle, I suppose you would say. So fascinating.
That is
fascinating.
correct.
Fascinating. Okay. Look, let's move on to some semi-balance of order here. Now, an issue, Darrell. I don't know if this affects you or not, but I see some talk about this, so I'm going to ask you here. First off, Cyberpunk 2077. Are you interested? Do you care?
I am interested, and I care in the sense that people that I like are excited about this. I am the guy who started The Witcher twice, played the first hour, and then didn't finish because it's just too much of a game for me to. It's just too much. That's a lot. I can play 100 games in the time it would take me to finish that one, and Cyberpunk is clearly going to be no different. So, do I want it to happen? Yes. Am I excited for people that are excited? Yes. Do I personally care? No, because I honestly probably won't play it. Or if I do play it, I'll play an hour or two and then say, I'll come back to you, and then never come back.
Well, that's basically my experience with The Witcher as well. I'm sure I have 4 different start points in that game. And I think most of the time I've got to the exact same spot in it as well. So, I think I like the idea of playing it, but I think it's the same thing. It's a massive commitment. But I've got some, bad news if you're anticipating it, perhaps indifferent news for us here, Darrell, about the fact that this game has been pushed till September, which, that's great. Who cares? There's plenty of games coming. But the more interesting fact here is that they go on to say in their press release, we are currently at a stage where the game is complete and playable, but there is still work to be done. Of course. Night City is massive, full of stories, content, and places to visit. But due to the sheer scale and complexity of it all, we will need more time to finish playtesting, fixing, and polishing. So this game is going to probably be even bigger than The Witcher by the sound of it, which is just insane.
Oh yeah.
Do you reckon part of the reason is they finished it? They've got it. They've been building it on the X. Because of course, why wouldn't you? A game this big, powerful, and cutting edge. And some guys whacked the disc into the PlayStation 5 demo kit and realized it doesn't work. It just can't handle it. Do you think that's a possibility?
As a Sony pony, I would like to think that it's the opposite. It's the other way around. But I'm sure they're coming out swinging, and they made so much money. Their money made money off The Witcher 3. So I'm sure they're like, we have tons of money and we can take all the time we want. Let's polish this bad boy up and make it the best game it can possibly be.
An even bigger game. That's terrifying. But look, let's take a sidebar for a second, only because I've watched one episode. I don't know if you've watched any. So this could be a very short sidebar. Have you watched any of this Witcher Netflix series yet?
I finished it last night.
Oh, so can you give me a little, is it good? What do you think? Because I've literally done one episode, so I was indifferent to the first episode, I think.
I like it a lot. I think the second episode is the worst. So if you were indifferent on the first one, the second one's going to set you back and you might not finish. But I think from the third episode on, it gets pretty good. And I don't really know what to liken it to, because I've never watched Game of Thrones, but The Witcher was good. And I'm a big Henry Cavill fan. I think he had a really good Geralt of Rivia voice, like his growl.
Yes.
I think he is a pretty good actor, and they did something really cool with his eyes that just made him look hardened and aggressive and mean all the time, even when he wasn't. And I really enjoyed it. I think overall the story is pretty good. It does some weird things with time that you might not pick up on, because I think there's 3 timelines going on, and it's not until like probably the 6th episode that you realize that, oh wait, they're telling the story from 3 perspectives, but they didn't necessarily let you know up front that that's what they were doing. But I recommend it, you know, and it's I'm not the type of person who sits down and watches a show, you know, by itself. Like if I'm going to watch a show, I'm going to be playing a game on a TV adjacent to it. And for the most part, I kept my games paused and watched the show. So I enjoyed it a lot.
Okay. Well, look, the most important question I have, because you've said you've played The Witcher a couple of times, or you started it at least, the same as me.
Yes.
You'll be familiar with the scene at the beginning, the full frontal nudity there, which, you know, look, it had aroused my interest, Darrell. I thought, you know, well, here's a TV show, it won't be animated, we'll get to see a bit of something, and that scene was left out of the show, you know. Well, at this point, I haven't seen it yet. Is there much nudity? I noticed at the end of the first episode, there was a lady just walking around randomly with the breasts out. Lovely to see. But does that improve? Because I know Game of Thrones, it's a big selling point, the nudity. Do we see this later or not so much?
There's a lot of nudity in it. But it, from what I hear about Game of Thrones, it's a little more, I want to say raunchy and sex focused. Whereas there is some of that in this game, but there's also like just more gratuitous nudity. Like there's scenes where certain characters are just naked and it's just they're naked. So I think it kind of teetered the line of explicit. I don't know. I mean, I'm a little more conservative when it comes to some of that stuff. You know, as far as like just the amount of nudity I watch at any given time. Like I don't really know the best way to put it, other than it was a lot for.
Oh, look! I'm sorry if I've made you feel a little awkward here. I apologize.
No. It wasn't
sorry.
like
you know. After we talked about the candle, I thought anything was open slather, but obviously,
well, the good thing was that Gwyneth Paltrow's candle doesn't actually look like her vagina, because that might make it a little weird.
Well, how can you? Are you sure?
I mean, I don't know. It's a regular candle, so to be determined.
Oh. God, look, I'm going to be thinking about that for the rest of this episode, but let's move on. I think it's what fascinates me is somebody in that position, that powerful, that cashed up, that successful. Why they would think that's a good idea? Maybe they just don't care anymore.
Well, you know, I like to think of it like this: is her and her, because I think the article read a little something along the lines of her perfume person, that she was coming up with new scents to sell her little perfume line. They were testing smells, and she said that one of them reminded her of her vagina. So I would imagine that somewhere down the line, the conversation was like, oh, wouldn't it be funny if we put something out like that and said it was in fact your vag? And then so they did. That's what the Loot Bros would do.
Oh, no, of course. The butt candle, of course. But what I think would be fantastic is I hope this becomes a massive seller, because that would be a fantastic legacy to leave to your children, wouldn't it? To carry on the business model. That'd be great. It'll be an awkward conversation there one day around the table, I'm sure.
Mommy.
But look, anyway, let's oh my goodness. Let's move on to some gaming talk, because I think, you know, we've reached that point where the buzz is about to go off if we don't. And why don't we take a look, Darrell, at what you've been playing?
Absolutely.
What would you like to throw out?
I've been playing some of Wolfenstein: The New Order. You know, I'll kind of put a little plug in here. We've been doing this backlog beatdown challenge between my podcast Loot Bros and a few other podcasts. And so I had in my head, there's just games that I've been holding on to for this one day where I'm going to go, oh my gosh, I'm playing this finally. And Wolfenstein 2 is one of those games I want to get to, but I wanted to finish the first one. I'm kind of playing through it. It's okay. It's, you know, it was probably really good in 2015. Right now, it's not my favorite game, but I'm playing through that. I'm playing through an equally worse game. I don't know if you've ever heard of the game Eat Lead, The Adventures.
No.
Okay. So back on the Xbox 360, PS3 generation, there was a game that came out. It was like a parody, like a game making fun of games and characters, called Eat Lead, and it's like the return of Matt Hazard. And essentially, it's like a Duke Nukem ripoff. And so you're this goofy character named Matt Hazard, who's a washed up video game action hero who's making his return to fame, and he's in a game, and someone hacks into the game and tries to do all this stuff to kill him because they couldn't beat the Matt Hazard games when they were a kid, and it's a big goofy mess, and it kind of plays like crap. Like it's not the best playing game, but I just remembered like when it came out, I enjoyed it, but I never finished it. So I'm playing it on PS Now, and it plays fine as far as like for PS Now is concerned. The game itself has its own issues. I don't think I'm going to go for the platinum. Like I'm playing the game on either normal or easy. I don't remember, but you have to play the game on the hardest difficulty. And I can't imagine that I'm going to enjoy playing this game again on hard because it's not easy on where I'm at now. Like it's just because the game itself doesn't control that great. So I'll clean up as many trophies as I can for it and knock it out just for the beatdown. I'm playing through Onrush. Now,
well, now just before you move on, I know that you're accustomed to quick dealings here, but I'm gonna draw this out a little bit if that's okay with you. There are some
in and out.
There are fantastic trophy names in this game. I love this multiplayer master. What? No multiplayer. Well, now we can take. So there is no multiplayer in that game. That's great. But there's also one back here, which if you read out of context. What was it? Yeah, hands-on approach and then eat fist. That's you guys could do something with that, I think. But that this game could be worth playing for just the trophy names. It's fantastic.
Oh, they're great.
Yeah, and descriptions.
There's like like blind luck is like killing people with blind fire, and then there's a quote. Sorry, didn't see you standing there.
That's great.
Peekaboo, I shoot you. The multiplayer one's really funny because it says, wait, no multiplayer. Well, I can't put the trophy back now, or something like that. That's the thing. It's like from start to finish, the menus, the trophy descriptions. It's making fun of games and action games and just taking yourself too serious. So I enjoy it. It's but I'm really good about finding a game that's inherently bad and then enjoying it, So
I like that.
there's just, I don't know. It's like when we do our show, some of my guys are like, you play the worst games. And it's like, I don't know. I'm attracted to trash games. I just think it's great.
Well, I sometimes find I bang on about the X and it's the graphics, it's fantastic on the TV or whatever, and I'm pushing the Pro to do these things, and then I look at what I'm playing, like the latest Rat game or some indie game that's just and I'm like, well, you wouldn't notice the difference if I was playing this on like a PS1. Like it's just it's interesting, isn't it? Yeah, we want the best, then we play other things that could work on anything, which is
it's funny because I do that too. I have a PS4 Pro and I'll play that's where I play my Rat games, and it's not. It's funny because, I've got 3 kids, and so I'm trying to be careful like what I play when I'm around them. I can't be playing The Witcher and things like that. So I usually pick my Rat games and my cheesy games that are easy plats to play when they're around. And I'm playing them the room that we all hang out and play games in. That's where my Pro's at. So I got the best PlayStation that you can buy, playing arguably some of the worst looking crap you can pay for. So
I tell you what, but Gravity Duck has never looked so good.
That's that 4K upscaling, baby.
It really is. It is. It's the next generation. Yeah. So what shall we move on to?
Well, see, you're a big racing game fan, and so I'm sure you've played Onrush, correct? Do you have the platinum for?
I do have the platinum, yes.
Okay, I am chasing the platinum for Onrush. I love that game.
Good luck.
It's a big grind.
Well, I mean, you tell me what you think of it first, and I'll fill in the gaps.
Okay. Well, so far it reminds me of Burnout. I really enjoy the crashing and just the race setup, the structure. You're going through all these different terrains. You're crashing in all these little dummy vehicles that they're just there. They're fodder just for you to grab boost and things like that. Hitting ramps, landing on top of other vehicles, crashing them, doing backflips on motorcycles. When you get your big boost power, it kicks in with some upbeat EDM music, and it's very visually stimulating. and I enjoy it. I think it's fun. It controls well. So far I've got like 59% of the trophies, and I haven't beat the game yet, but I'm just enjoying myself, just really, really digging it. And I think it's one of those games that I will definitely do the grinding for I think I got to grind out for like medals, and I have to get all the stars on the levels and crap like that. But I'm definitely, like gear items and stuff. But so far, I'm really enjoying the game.
Did you come? Now I believe this game was on PS Plus at some point, not too long ago.
That's how I got it.
Yeah, that's how you came across it. Yeah, so it has an interesting story because it came out like the middle-ish, I'm going to say, of 2018. Don't fact check that too closely, listeners, but I think that is correct. It came out as a full price game, and the problem with this game is, like, you didn't mention it there, but I imagine you are doing a bit of this. It's very much a co-op game. It's much more fun playing with real people. I know you can play with the AI or whatever else, but actually having actual, real players in the race. So the problem with it releasing like that was that not a lot of people picked it up, I think. Whereas I think now the experience after it's been on Plus has been way, way better, because I'm not sure, maybe you can attest to that. But when I did this, it was about the time it came out on Plus. There was a lot of people playing it. So you could always, you could join games and stuff like that. Is that still the case, or is it sort of quietened down a bit?
Honestly, I wouldn't know. I haven't played with anybody but my kids.
Oh, okay.
Because I got it on Plus, I have it downloaded on my main PlayStation, and then I log into my secondary account, my secondary PlayStation, and I just play it there. So my son and I, we can log in and play it, but I don't know, he's not really into racing games yet. It's kind of not quite his thing. So we only played once or twice, and for the most part, I just play by myself. I just kind of get in the races. I'm beating the superstar mode right now. So I guess once I do that, I'll need to then kind of grind out some of the multiplayer stuff to get my medals. So
yeah, most of that will come pretty naturally, I think. One of the advantages of playing this with other people online or whatever is that you can make progress on the challenges. So if there's two of you, you can both make progress on the same challenge. Your scores or your takedowns can be added up. So it does make some things a little bit easy. From memory, there's a couple of tough challenges in there, so you can look forward to that, I think. But the rest, you got the vomit comment as well. That's fun.
Yeah, that one's been a pain because I've gotten 3 of the barrel rolls, but the fourth one I can't seem to land.
And
I watched videos on it too. I'm just terrible at games, so.
Yeah, coming off the ramp off the side. No, look, I know. It's an interesting game. So by Codemasters or whatever, although I believe they closed this part of the studio down, although they're constantly reshuffling studios anyway to produce racing games. But for any listeners that are used to Codemaster games, the trophy lists are usually, well, particularly in the last year or two, have become more and more grindy and challenging. I think this one is a little bit of a grind, but it's definitely attainable. And yeah, you're right. It's quite fun. Can I ask you about a game here a few weeks ago?
Sure.
In early January, this Five Nights at Freddy's. Now, this is just a port of the original, isn't it, to PS4?
Yeah, it's a port of the PC and iOS game.
Yeah. Now, you did this legit, didn't you?
Oh no, There, I did I found the glitch.
Oh.
I did the glitch. So
I saw 3 weeks and 4 days and thought, look, this man's done it legit. And see, I didn't know about this game until I saw you post it in the backlog beatdown. And then I found the glitch, as of course I do, and did it in an hour.
Yeah.
Because there's no way I could have done this without it.
No,
it's very challenging.
No. See, I bought that one. My kids love it. And I mentioned on our show before that we have the Five Nights at Freddy's VR. And it was CJ, man, oh my gosh, watching my kids get jump scared is truly one of the biggest joys of my life. Like, it is so funny. And I'm talking, this is a family that hides behind doors and scares each other on a daily basis. Like, my 4-year-old will hide behind a door and scare his brothers and sisters, his mom, everybody. Like, it's a big deal in our house. So jump scare each other. And so the kids, been playing on their tablets and whatnot. And I've heard it, I've heard them talk about it. I've bought all the little figures and pops and stuff for them, but I've never really followed what exactly Five Nights at Freddy's is. And then when the VR game came out, so we played on VR. I put my wife in it. My wife don't play video games. I put my wife in the headset, turned the surround sound up real loud, and watched her get jump scared out of her pants. And it was amazing. So I've kind of fallen in love with the franchise just because of the sheer enjoyment I get from watching my wife and kids get scared of it. So when the game came out, we were going to beat it legit, We're going to all sit down together, turn the lights off, turn the volume up, and just try to play through it. And then I don't know, I was doing some reading on the trophy list, the 2020 mode or whatever. And I saw on the PSN profile someone posted about a glitch. I was like, ooh, a glitch. So then I had this great idea. I was like, I'm going to do this when my kids aren't around and then tell them how great I am at video games and then watch them suffer trying to do it on their own. So, and then after a little while, after a little while, I gave in and told them about the glitch. So,
yeah, no, it would be brutal to try and do that legit. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. I like that sort of thing. See, the last thing that I played, last horror game I played in VR. Now I like horror games. I don't always last long, but the last one I played, and I know you're familiar with this game, so we can talk about it briefly, was Resident Evil 7. And I know you played that. Did you play that in VR as well, or a bit of it in VR?
Oh yeah, I played a bit of it in VR. I get sick real easy, so I can't do much in VR for long.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a fantastic game to play in VR, and it sort of, I mean, it was probably a little bit too intense for me, and I think, not spoilerish, but early on, it is early on. The father, I'm going to say, I think that was his character. He's chasing you around the house. I don't know if you remember that. You're trying to find a key, I think, or something. Yeah. And so, I'm standing up there or whatever, and it's pretty tense, and look, to be honest with you, listeners, I'm pretty sure the VR will kill me one day, I have a feeling there's a high probability that you'll just have a heart attack in there or something. So that's always in the back of my mind, or whatever. And so it was getting pretty intense. And there's a bit, Darrell, there, I don't know if you remember, where he actually jumps through the wall. You're on the sort of left, and he comes through, and that scared the shit out of me. And so, because there's not a huge amount of room to move with the cords, but there is a bit of room or whatever. And of course, I don't know if this happens to you, but quite often in all these games, the tracking, I end up facing backwards almost. Or, I've totally lost track of where I'm actually facing because the tracking seems to move around as you play, the longer you play or whatever. And so it scared the absolute shit out of me. And so I turned left just to naturally avoid him. And I sort of stepped or walked or almost ran quite fast. And I ran straight into the door in the room that I play in. And I gave myself a black eye from this Resident Evil 7. So that's that was an awkward story to explain the next day at work, but that is the last sort of horror thing I've played in VR. I tell you what,
Dude,
those headsets
awesome.
they can hurt. Trust me, if you really hit with force. And it was equally terrifying hitting it as that game. But actually, the ironic thing is that's as far as I'm up to in that game because I've never gone back. But yeah, I will have to.
Similar story. My son, he had his best friend was spending the night one night, and the kid doesn't have a VR. So anytime my nephews come over, or my nieces come over, or my son's friends, whatever, they jump in the VR because they think it is the coolest thing ever. So they were playing what's the VR Worlds, I think it is. There's the cat game where you put the headset on, you can be the cat, and then everyone else with controllers can be the little mice. So they're playing that, and for whatever reason, he was looking down, and he ended up looking down and hitting his face on the floor. And he didn't give himself a black eye, but he gave himself like a little mark across the bridge of his nose, and of course, it made his eyes water up real bad. I was like, "Geez!" I mean, he like basically headbutted the ground. I was like, "What are you doing, kid?"
It's easy to do because you do lose total spatial awareness, so you don't expect it to be there, do you? And you just sort of whack, and you're like, holy shit. But yeah, no, it's terrifying. Look, listeners, in full disclosure, I'm running off a no prep plan today. It's just casual. It's relaxed because that's how it should be. And I forgot to talk about this backlog beatdown, but I think now is a good time to do it, sir, if that's okay, because I think we've got any of the casuals out. I think we've just got the hardcore listeners left now. If you're still listening.
Gwyneth Paltrow's fan base is still here.
Well, that's why I never start. That's right. But that's why I never start with gaming talk, because we try and weed those people out early on. They can go over to the IGNs of the world and things like that, and we just want the people here that can withstand 20 minutes of torture before they even hear a game. So that's what we're aiming for, I feel. But let's talk about this backlog beatdown, sir. Could you let us? Could you tell us about it? How does it work? How could we get involved if we wanted to?
So what we did was I am good friends with the Proven Gamer Network, and they have a couple different podcasts. They have the Game Stuff podcast, which is like butt stuff but for games, and then they have the Trophy Horse podcast. And we like to kind of do little challenges back and forth. And they won't do another trophy war with us, which is probably a conversation for another day. But so I was like, man, what can we do? What's something that we all can like participate in and get all of our listeners involved in, and kind of cross pollinate, but just have something to go back and forth with. And I pitched a few different ideas, but there's one theme that remains true between all the podcasts, is that someone on the show says, I keep buying games, but I don't ever play them. And we've done like a backlog beatdown kind of segment on our show in the past, where we just was like, hey, here's the games I played that were kind of new and fresh or whatever, but here's the backlog games that I'm trying to eliminate. But I didn't want to do that again. I didn't want to, like, when we resurrected the show, I didn't want to just go to all the old, bits. So I pitched the idea to the other shows, to your show as well, that what if we, from the January 1st until December 31st of 2020, open up to anyone who wants to participate and say, we are going to make a cognizant effort to eliminate the backlog of games we've accumulated, and then give ourselves like a point system for what we've beaten, and then take away points for things that we continue to purchase. So basically the way it works is this: is as of January 1st, 2020, every single game that you beat is 1 point in your favor. Every game that you 100% or platinum is 1 point in your favor. So let's say you beat a game last year, but you cleaned up all the trophies this year. Well, then now you've gotten yourself a point. If you beat the game this year and then you immediately platinum it, then you have 2 points. But if you play a rat game and you get the platinum without actually beating the game, you only get 1 point. And then every game you purchase in 2020 is a negative point. And we have a shared spreadsheet with a graph and everything. And basically all you have to do to participate at any point in time of the year, there is no cutoff, is that you just, you beat a game, you take a screenshot, your trophy shot, whatever, and then you post it in any one of the podcast groups with the hashtag backlog beatdown. And then myself or Kalai, one of the other hosts, will add you to the spreadsheet. And then we just kind of have a little back and forth about it every show on all the different shows to kind of see where everybody's at. And it's been really fun so far. Lots of different people have joined in. People that I didn't know even listened to the show are now posting the games that they're beating. And that's been what's really exciting about it, is you have, it's a way to interact with the listeners that may not. Every week, CJ, we ask for listener questions, and every week we ask for feedback, and every week we're like, hey, will you go rate our show? Will you leave, comments? And you know how it is when you're hosting a show.
It's lovely that you still ask.
Yeah, well, I think what happens is the listeners start to hear that as like, here's the commercial. They don't really mean it. They just have to say it. And the thing about it is, and this as a host and as a creative person in general, you want feedback. You know what I'm saying? Like when people are listening to the show, you want to know what's good, you want to know what's bad, but you also want to know how to serve your audience, And so that's one thing I'm constantly trying to do, is I'm trying to find ways to serve my audience and to interact with them. Not everybody wants to write in a stupid question to the Loot Bros every week. And not everybody wants to take the 30 seconds to go on iTunes and give it a 5-star review and say best show ever. Not everybody's willing to lie and say that, so I'm just trying to find fun ways to interact with people that works at their pace, So, if you got listeners that are listening, they want to join the backlog beatdown. I mean, you've joined in, and you took last place very quickly. You went all the way in.
Yes. Yeah. Well, look, that was not easy to do either. I had to work, I was warned that you buy a lot of games, you people, so I had to prepare myself.
It's been really cool because the 3 main people who buy a ton of games have really been behaved for the first 16 days of the year.
Well, hang on a second. Let's just to detract for a second. There was a mass buying spree on the 31st of December,
Oh
wasn't
my
there,
gosh.
from a lot of these people? I just played by the rules and didn't buy till the first. But
Oh my God. At CJ, I ordered, I think, 16 games. Like, because at the same, right about the time, right at the end of the year, GameStop was like doing their first ever buy two, get two free.
Hmm.
I went into all the local stores and anything that I was even remotely interested in. Okay, I'll give you an example. I haven't watched South Park in 10 years. I went and
Mhm.
bought, I went and bought the South Park games just in case. You never know.
Yes.
Uh,
Just in case you might accidentally buy them later this year.
right. I went, I went and I bought Kingdom Come Deliverance. I'm not gonna play that game, you know. But like, what if something happens in 2020 and I have this thought like, oh my goodness, I need that now. So, and then I went on GameStop's website, and then I bought more. Like whatever was in the store, I filled the orders on there, and dude, it got a little crazy, you know. Like I was
Yeah.
buying like games digitally, I was buying games physically, I was hitting up Amazon, I was cashing in Christmas gift cards and buying games. It was awesome.
Well, you strike me as a man that can handle a big front log, so I'm sure you'll be you'll be fine there. But what's important to say here, listeners, is that it's not only PlayStation, is it? You can play on Xbox, you can play on PC. I don't know,
Absolutely.
mobile perhaps even, but it's sort of any system, isn't it?
If you can play a game there, it counts. And just to kind of dig a little deeper into the kind of the quote unquote rules, the biggest thing is keeping it simple. Okay. And we've had a lot of good feedback. We've had a lot of people ask really good questions, but ultimately the way it works is this: if you buy it, it's a point against you. If you beat it, it's a point for you.
Hmm.
We the screenshots and take a picture of the credits roll and whatever. That's just so that if anybody wanted to challenge and say that you did or did not beat said game, that there is some proof.
Mm.
And then, with it needs to be a standalone release. So like, let's say you buy a big chunk of DLC for The Witcher. Well, it doesn't count against you because it wasn't released by itself. You have to have the base game to play it. But let's say it's something, like Infamous First Light.
Hmm.
Infamous First Light was a standalone DLC that you can play without the base game. So that would be a point against you if you buy it, a point for you if you beat it, and it had a platinum trophy list or platinum for this trophy list. So that one could potentially be 2 points, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
And with the point system, we wanted to keep it simple, but we also want to make it to where people who stack plats and do, all the rat games can't really crush the competition by doing that. Sure, with most of the rat games, it's you buy one and you get two versions, so you're going to get your your negative point there. And then most of those games you don't actually beat. So you're
Mm.
only going to get a point for the platinum. And then if you get the stack version, you get that platinum. So there's your 2 points like you would get, what I'm saying? Anyways,
Mm.
um, so we tried to keep it simple, but yet meaningful to where someone couldn't just tank the system and ruin it for everybody. And at the end of it, I've seen this too, and this is what's been so cool. I've watched some of the listeners kind of put their own challenges out there. Like one guy, he was like, all right, whoever legit beats the most real, like 8 hour or more long games, games that are obviously not the little cheap rat plats.
Mm.
He was like, I'll buy them a $60 game of their choice,
Mm.
and then one of our co-host, there's like a running gag on our show called the PD Diaries. And the PD Diaries is basically like this make believe diary of all the different places that him and his front log have gone in his lifetime.
Mm.
And so spoiler
Well
alert, you can't.
traveled, I imagine.
Yes, spoiler alert, you can't leave home without it. So they've gone places. And so what he's going to do is at the end of the year, whoever wins the competition, he's going to actually give them a tangible physical copy of the PD Diaries. And so like, I don't know, just trying to keep it fun and silly, like not take it too serious because there's going to be some tryhards out there who are going to like, oh, I got to win because that's what I do. But I really, really enjoyed watching the listeners interact with each other and encourage each other too. And that's the biggest thing is we all buy games. Some of us buy more than others.
Mm.
And I did want to say this: free games don't count. They don't hurt you. They can only help you. So PlayStation Plus, Epic's free games, Xbox Live games, Game Pass, PS Now, like those games do not count against you. But if you beat them, they're points. So if you're the type of person who doesn't necessarily buy a ton of games, but you have all the subscription services, well, then you're at quite the advantage.
It sounds like a lot of fun, and as you say, it's also a great way to just find out about some new games if you like. Because I noticed that some of the people, they're not only just posting what they've beaten, but they're posting about their experience with the game even as they're playing it, which I think it's fantastic. But look, just before we move on, I did want to say, Darrell, if you ever find you have an issue with your front log, if it's getting unmanageable, I have the great number here for a Taiwanese doctor that I can hook you up with. But until we get to that stage, so. The other thing, now I don't know if you saw this, friend of the show here, Gaz Davis, he's also a participant in this backlog beatdown. Now he's got his own thing running on Profiles, which is like a track your spending, if you like. Which if you're sort of that way inclined, that's also a very interesting idea where you're not setting yourself you can only spend this much, but you're just keeping track of how much you're spending. Now, Darrell, I think we're in a similar position. I thought about this for quite a few days, and I thought this would be really awesome to do. And then I thought, I'm not going to give the IRS that much of a head start on me, so I'm not going to do it. But that's also another option. So there are many ways, because we often hear about people like their backlogs and it's overwhelming and this sort of stuff. But positive ways to have fun, I think with them. So
absolutely
look into that. So listeners, I'm going to dump just a little bit of what I've been playing on you, just for why not, basically. And I'll give a little shout out here to Tom Clancy's Ghost Recon Breakpoint. Now, Darrell, is this a game that you've picked up, before the end of the year, or?
Oh, absolutely.
Yes, excellent. So look, with these games, I like a Sherpa. I like to send someone out into the field to experience the game, a lot of the game before I step into it to see if it's worth it. And I'd like to take the opportunity to thank Sir Digwig. I know that he's out there at the moment in this game. He's put many, many hours. I think he may be approaching the 50-hour mark, so the plat or whatever. And he's given me some mixed feelings. I don't know. Have you played any of this game yet, Darrell, at all? Or?
Yeah, I played. My brother has it on PC,
Mm-hmm.
And I was actually over there when I was out headset shopping. I was actually over there to try out some of his Astros before I purchased them, and I played some Breakpoint, and all I did was roll and fall down hills.
Yeah.
I mean, I did fight a helicopter and I got killed, but for the most part, I was just. It's got some really good rolling and traversal options. So I was being a little ridiculous and just kind of rolled down hills, and yeah, it was pretty cool. So when I play it, it plays nice and it looks really good.
Yeah. Look, I think it's a lot better than when it was launched. It was a buggy mess, I think. But I mean, there are still issues. Like I did a mission the other day, and I got halfway through the mission, and I sort of fell down between a wall and a tree, and I was just stuck. I couldn't move, so I had to reset and lost the progress. Which, so there are still a few little frustrating things. Maybe stay away from the trees and the walls, and you'll be okay. But it's also it is also a bit of a stealth game if you play by yourself. I think because there are certain missions that obviously would be a lot easier with a group of 4 or whatever. But if you are, because there are no AI helpers in this, you're just by yourself. If you're playing solo, the stealth approach gets used, I think, more. But that having been said, it's a massive map like the first Ghost Recon was. I think personally the map is probably too big, but I think that's only me. I think there's a lot there. I don't know if you played the first one or not, Darrell, but one of the issues was the map was so big, but there was a lot of nothing or a lot of just the same stuff. And this one, at least, there's more in the map, I think. So like that's good, but it is go in. If you don't like traversing between areas, and I know there's a fast travel system, but you have to get to the areas to unlock it. But if you don't like that sort of stuff, I think you perhaps will not like this. But that aside, I think it plays okay single player. What I've played so far, so that it's getting better. It's getting better. And then I'll throw out this Japanese VN, because I know we have a mutual friend here that's very interested in the Japanese VNs. And this, of course, is the famous Japanese coming of age novel, My Hand is Outstretched and I Have Pink Hair. Now, if you're not familiar, obviously that is the translation from Japanese. If you're not familiar with this game, it is a beautiful tale of a girl that she struggles, with herself and life. I think that's a fair way to say it. And she becomes a fast food chain worker. I don't know if you know this game or you're familiar with it, Darrell. And she's forever extending her hand out And then one day someone says, why do you keep extending your hand? And she goes, well, I'm just passing the food. I'm passing the love. I'm passing everything. It's very metaphorical. It's very deep. It's very powerful, and this girl is only 9 years old as well. So that's, it's fascinating or whatever. And then the customer says, well, I think you should dye your hair pink because your message is good, but it's not complete. And so she does. And this, as you can see, listeners, this is the genesis of the story. My hand is outstretched and I have pink hair. So look, I would recommend that VN, and you can find that on the Japanese store if it so wishes you. The only other thing I can throw out, Darrell, is Code Vein. That will be a -1 for me. And that will never be a +1, I can assure you. That game is going to be harder than I anticipated. In fact, I can't even get out of the tutorial yet. So that's going to be well, look, the funny thing is I couldn't figure out what to do. And then the game blue screened on me. And I think it was sympathy. I think it was just a sign to move on. But
it was like you haven't progressed far enough for the game to kill you. So the console was just like, all right, you're dead.
it was scaling me on the level the game should play at, and there's just no level available, so it just stopped. I like it, but it's not the first time that's happened, so I'm used to that. What else can I throw out in brief? The Australian Open Tennis 2. So if you're interested in the tennis at all or whatever else, there's not many sims. In fact, there's nothing in the last few years except for this company that's producing them. Obviously, we have the Australian Open and starting next week at time of recording. So it's kind of exciting if the smoke lets up, because, far be it, for the athletes to play with a little bit of smoke. But, a separate issue. This game is a big step up from the first one. The first one was a buggy mess. The trophies were a nightmare once they patched them. But this one, it works quite well. It's like it's not a AAA game, but it's not a B game, but somewhere in the middle. It has a lot of the licensed players in it as well. It has a ton of it actually has the licensed events as well, and the calendar. So, if you're playing a full season, you're in for a long ride there or whatever else. It does have Fast 4 as well as the regular. So you can really, you can really play around with it, which is pretty cool. At the end of the day, on normal, it's not a challenge. I haven't played it on hard, but there does seem to be a fair few options with the shop mechanics, but also, it's hard to explain. Also, it's still that idea of just sort of, a power scale and then just moving the left stick to roughly the position. So it's a little limiting, but for an arcade, which I would say it is more than a sim arcade sport game, it's quite fun. And then, because I'm dragging on, Darrell, I'm going to talk lastly about this Final Fantasy 12, the Zodiac Age. Are you familiar with this game?
I am.
Well, this is a game that never ends. I don't know if you knew that about it. It's from the PS2, so that's a simpler time when people just had nothing else to do but play Final Fantasy 12, obviously. So, I have a reluctance to play PS2 games at the best of times, but I was told this was very, very good, so I thought I would do it. And look, it is very good, Darrell. It's a 40-hour game that takes 150 hours because of the RNG. So that's what you're sort of in for. And I've played a lot of games, but this is the first time I've run into RNG of this nature. So perhaps this was common in the PS2 days. I'm not sure. But, there are obviously weapon drops and things like this. They're run on a percentage. So it might be a 5% chance of drop or a 1% chance of drop. So that's all fine. But the enemies are also randomly spawning at times. So basically, listeners, what this involves is literally just running in and out of screens for half an hour sometimes till the thing appears. So it's an interesting style. I'm glad, Darrell, that they did not continue with this formula into the modern generation.
Yeah.
That aside, having dropped a ton on it, it's good. I don't think you would enjoy it if you're not a bit of a hardcore JRPG lover. I suppose it's definitely not as approachable as Final Fantasy 15, basically Assassin's Creed of Final Fantasy 15. Having said that, I think this is a really good alternative if you want to play Final Fantasy 14, but you don't want to invest 500 hours and a sub into it. It plays differently, obviously, with the Gambit system, but in a way, it plays very, very similarly. It really teaches you, like with 15, you really don't learn much about the magic or the different attack styles. It's just a button masher, but this one, it really does force you to learn all the different spells and how they work and react in different ways. And sure, you're setting up a system here, Darrell, a Gambit system that basically auto-plays the game for you. But you do have to, there's a lot of strategy because different sections are going to require different setups and different approaches. And there is an overall trial mode of 100 levels. And this starts off off pretty easy up to about 60 or 70, but then it gets progressively harder. And of course, these battles go one after the other. So there's no real time to recharge or whatever. However you finish the previous one is how you start the next one. So there's a lot of strategy in setting these things up. And I mean, there are, I obviously didn't figure this out myself, listeners. There's some fantastic YouTube videos by Fuzzy Finger Gaming, I believe, and also a wonderful website, www.jegged.com, that has an amazing guide on this, on locations and strategies and everything. So, if you ever thought that, you were interested in Final Fantasy XIV, perhaps this is the place to start. I joke 150 hours. Literally, you could finish the game in 50. If you want the plat, it's probably going to be close to 100 just because of the cleanup and the random nature of it. But it's interesting. If you have a high tolerance for bullshit, I think this is okay for you. But well, it's like, the other day, Darrell, you have to catch this monster thing, but for it to appear, you have to be in the room for 30 minutes. It won't spawn until you've just been in there for 30 minutes. So in effect, you just have to, just stay there. And it's stuff like that.
It's insane because, nowadays we can just look up a guide for that stuff. But I used to play those games. Now, granted, I didn't play Zodiac Age, but I played previous Final Fantasies to death, and you would just naturally figure those things out. And it's like nowadays, 30 minutes, that's money, man. That's like that's more valuable to me than the actual money. So 30 minutes in a room, I'm like, man, that's so much stuff I could do. I could play 10 more games in 30 minutes.
Definitely, it shows me, because I didn't play in the PS2 era, but it shows you how much more value for money you got out of your games. Because I mean, that's an extreme example, but even I like the clock. I think for me is about 80 hours now, and I'm still finding new things and little quests and stuff. So there is a ton of content in there if you want to pursue it. But I mean, to take your point of discovering things, if you take this as an academic exercise or something, and you look at it, it's some amazing stuff people have found in this game. It's all based on this RNG. And I was watching this video, and you can manipulate the RNG to get a weapon, so it's a 1% drop. It could take you the rest of your natural life to get that. So they manipulate the RNG by loading the game up, running to a spot, killing everyone, saving the game, then reloading in your current game. They're counting the number of stairs an AI walks up, because all the AI offset the RNG. And all this does is it finds your place in the RNG. And then from there, you do this other thing, and then that will guarantee the weapon drops. And I was like, how the hell would have you found that out? It's just, the mathematics and stuff. It's crazy. It really is. But, I'm glad someone figured it out. But yeah, very, very crazy. But, if that does interest you, listeners, I would recommend jumping into that. But it is a massive game, addictive, but a massive time sink. So I'm looking down. I think I started this. This is a funny VN, Darrell. This AI, the Somnium files. This wouldn't be a VN for our mutual friend because it involves work. But it's I'm going to talk more about. I'm going to talk more about this in the future. It does play in English. It's a longer VN, 20 to 30 hours that you can skip, I suppose, but it's not really a skip. It's more of a murder mystery detective type VN, but it's interesting. It's got some very good Japanese humor in it, but we'll touch more on that once I'm beyond 3%. I feel so we can do it some more justice. So look, that's enough of what we've been playing. So listeners, if you've made it that far, congratulations. Here endeth the gaming talk, I suppose. Well, we might slip some in, but I thought what we'd do, Darrell, for the second part here, if you like, is we might just talk a little bit about your music. And your band that's recently rebooted as well, and then maybe even just generally about some editing, because I noticed in the Discord there's been some interest in the last couple of weeks about editing and people getting into it and stuff like that. So are you happy to talk on those things?
Absolutely.
Cool. So how about just before, because I think we want to focus on the music, but how about just before we do that, why don't we just talk editing really briefly, and then
Sure.
we can get into that. So my experience obviously is not very good with editing. I didn't know a lot when we started. In fact, I learned quite a lot from you, Darrell. So what I thought I might ask you is what sort of what's your basic workflow? What's your setup? What would you advise for someone recording a podcast? What's the basic process?
So if you're going to start today, nowadays it's so easy to start. There's so much out there to get going, and there's so many good tools. The most basic of setups would be to download Audacity. Audacity is a free audio recording program where you can, you know what I'm saying, arm your tracks, load in your microphone, press record, and it goes. If you want something a little bit with a little bit more options and a little bit that has a better setup for things that are not just podcast recording, I would suggest Reaper. It is also a free program. And then, of course, if you're a Mac user, you would use GarageBand because GarageBand is amazing. But as far as getting started nowadays, I mean, there's for me, I use my setup currently right now is I'm using a Yeti Blue USB condenser mic, and I'm using Reaper to record. That's kind of that's my go-to for any kind of recording, even for music. I have used Audacity. I have Studio One. I have used GarageBand, things like that. And then you just want a good pair of headphones that are noise canceling. You don't want a lot of bleed over into your tracks. You can listen to some of the Loot Bros podcast episodes, and you'll hear from time to time, depending on who's editing, a little bit of bleed over from the headphones, and that can be a little distracting and a little frustrating for some listeners. Some people, they don't want to hear extra noise as far as like things in the tracks for that kind of stuff. But I mean, for the most part, it's really easy to get started nowadays. I've even used Turtle Beach headsets to record. The microphones are getting so good that depending on what you're trying to go for, I've used USB Turtle Beaches and just, recorded that way. And then as far as like, again, like I said, for a beginner, something like Audacity, really simple to use. You'd load in your track, the line, that you want to record on. You'd arm it. You hit a little red button. Then you hit the record button and you just go. You just talk, do whatever you're going to do. And then at the end, you'd export it out in whatever format you want to use, whether it be WAV or MP3. Very simple cutting and splicing and tools and things that you would need to maybe cut out some dead air, or if you wanted to, remove certain parts of conversation. I prefer things like Reaper, stuff that has real simple hotkeys. One of my favorite things to do is, and this is going to get, I don't know, stop me if I'm getting too deep in the weeds. One of my favorite things to do is to fly through the tracks and highlight them with my mouse and then click the letter S to splice or split the track so that I can move things around, get rid of dead air, things like that. And then click the space bar for obviously playing and resuming your track or whatever. And I don't know, it's just, if you can imagine someone who plays a PC, does PC gaming, right? You're controlling everything with your mouse, and then you've got your hands on the WASD or whatever. That's what I look like when I'm editing. Like I'm just kind of flying through. I can't play a PC game to save my life, but if you put it in a WAV file or MP3 and import it into Reaper, I can do some damage. But I don't. And it's funny because I saw like some of the listeners, talking about getting into editing and recording and things, and aside from going into the really nitty gritty, saying nitpicky things, the biggest thing I can tell you to do is get your hands on some software, get you a microphone, no matter how good or bad it is, and then just start recording, and get in there and play around with it, because it's one of those things to where you can watch all these videos and stuff, and you might be a visual learner and what have you, but like you don't really understand how audio works until you start dialing into it. You start clicking on it. You got to kind of play with the plugins. You got to look into things like noise reducers, and then compression and things like that. You got to be mindful of your tracks clipping out, and it's fun to do, but it can be a little bit overwhelming at first just looking at it. But like the only way you're going to learn it is to dive in, and just kind of start playing with things.
Yeah, I think that's well said. And I sort of, one of the things that I hear often from guests and just even from people just, in everyday life talking, is that they're like, well, I just don't like the sound of my own voice. So, I don't want to hear it. And one of the things I would caution, like I would agree with you that the use of good noise canceling headphones it really does help. But if you're not used to wearing them, if you're just editing, that's fine. But if you're recording as well, and I don't know how you feel about this, Darrell, because I know some people even put a bit of feedback of their own voice in their thing or whatever. It's too much for them. But if you just do it pure and you're wearing decent noise cancelling headphones, you are going to hear your voice very naturally. I don't know if you find this, Darrell, or not. You're not going to hear the resonance that the room gives you. So it's always a good idea maybe to record a little bit of yourself talking first, just so if that is going to be an issue for you, you become more comfortable with it. But I think for me personally, I find that a lot easier, actually. I think not actually hearing in the open ambient space. But that's just a personal thing. Now, what I wanted to ask you was, so I come from a more classical music background or whatever. I'm not unused to music editing, which is quite different, I find, to speech editing. And when I started, I was a bit overwhelmed, as you say. But I think in hindsight, speech editing is a lot easier. I think you get to learn to read the wave files a little more. What I find interesting, and I know programs can do this for you, but this is sort of what I want to ask you. Do you use your own ear to determine the levels of each of the track, like each different person's track you're sent? Or do you rely on the program just to do the overarching analysis to set the volumes for each track so that they're even, listeners, when you listen?
I do it by ear, which is not always accurate. There's days where I'll edit the show and we'll have 4 audio tracks. And then to me, it'll sound a certain way when you're editing. And then I will go back and listen to the show and I go, oh crap, my voice was way too low, or this one dude's was way too loud. So there are options in there, like levelers and things like that. But for me, I started editing music and then worked my way into editing podcasts. It's kind of like something to experiment with. And I don't know, I've got like a old curmudgeon like set in my ways on how I do it. So like I don't use near as many tools as I probably should, and I don't use I make it harder on myself. But it's like, this is the way I learned to do it, so that's the way I'm doing it now.
Yeah. No, I think there's a lot of merit in doing it by your ear. I do it the same way, and I think one of the interesting things I find when I listen to a lot of podcasts and professional podcasts is that quite often it's very monotonic, and I don't always think that's because of the presenter either in their natural cadence of speech. I think that's one of the dangers these programs, again, just from what I've experienced so far, by running an auto leveler, I think that tends to leave that effect. So, yep. I mean, it's something to think about, listeners, if you're going to play with this. And I know you're like, oh, well, I'm not a musician, blah, blah, blah. I don't trust my ears. But the easiest way, if that's the position, is over time, if you're working with the same person, you will get to learn their rough levels. And I'm sure you find this, Darrell, but, I can see Mindy's sound file now. I don't even need to know it's hers. I know it'll be hers because I can see the cadence of her speech. And, right. I know my own now from doing it so much. And there's other guests as well that we've had on that I you can see an or a but or an R from miles away. You don't need to listen to it anymore or whatever. Or what what it's like, yeah. These sort of things, but you get a rough feel for their setup and where they sort of speak as well. So it's just an experience thing. But what I'd suggest, and it's something that I hadn't considered, is when you do finally burn your final track off or whatever, is to play it on, if you have the time, to play just sections of it on different things. Like if you have a wireless speaker or a different set of headphones or whatever, or if you're really cruel on yourself, play it on your mobile phone, because that's usually the worst sound quality. Oh, yeah. And it'll give you an idea for levels as well, because you never know how. It's all well and good for us sitting in our ivory towers listening on our lovely headphones, but you never know how anyone else is going to be listening to it. So that's interesting. So, yeah.
I want to add on to that. So we do a lot of music production stuff, and we do all of our own mixing and mastering. And the way that we test everything is we put it in a vehicle. So you go, like, we'll do like a rough mix, right? Like I just submitted a mix to the guys for a track they were getting ready to release. And I'll do the first wave of mixing. We'll kind of get all the levels kind of set where we want them. And then the drummer of our band, he will do the final mixing and mastering. And it's a pretty good system we got. But what we do is I would send the mix and like the stems to everybody. And then we listen to it in all of our vehicles. I don't know if it's just like that's because of music or what, but to me, there's no better way to find out how evenly leveled things are than in your car, because it's almost like the way the sound is distributed through the surround aspect. If you're going to hear a discrepancy, that's where you're going to hear it. And I don't know, like I highly recommend, like when we first started podcasting, I spent years editing music. But when we first started podcasting, that was a big learning curve, because it's like, wait a second, it sounds good in my headphones, but my headphones are built to make things sound good. There's automatic compression. When things are exported in stereo, they play a certain way. But then I'd get in my vehicle, and then all of a sudden somebody's voice was so low that it was distorted whenever they were speaking. And it's not like we're these giant human beings that have the deepest voices. It was just that the mix was, it was a bad mix. So I recommend too, if you're going to listen to any kind of audio that you mix or produce on your own, listen to it in your vehicle. It'll surprise you what it sounds like. I feel like if it sounds good there, you got a good chance of it sounding good in headphones, and in most places. So.
Yeah, that's a good tip. A good tip. I think one of the things that I like listening to, your show, and perhaps, Trophy Horse, but perhaps for a different reason, is that you run a very natural edit, I think. And I was talking to Reddy, last week's guest, about this, because he dabbles in a lot of music production as well, and that's what he revels in, that natural edit. And the funny thing is, when you come from a music perspective, and I'll be interested to have your take on this, that quite often it's not natural. Like there can be so many, you've got VSTs running, you've got so many other different things that you're doing to manipulate the sound, that what you record may be very different to what actually you send out, once you finish doctoring it.
Oh, yeah.
So in a podcast situation, it is that natural flow that you're trying to achieve. And as you said, you talked about clipping and things like that before, where you're cutting, the ends of voice tracks off, or whatever else for filler words, or whatever the reason be. It's very difficult to get that natural flow, isn't it? I think that's one of my biggest challenges. I notice sometimes when I listen back, I try not to listen back too often, but when we do edits, it is hard to maintain that any sense of natural flow in the line.
Well, see, I listen back to every single show that I do, for lots of reasons. And this is here's a tip. Don't be too hard on yourself, because you're going to learn that your speech patterns and the words that you use to conjoin your sentences can be obnoxious. There are some shows I'll listen back and I'll say the words like and 100 times. And I'm like, I just did it. And I'm like, wait a second. I do that, and the more I listen to it, the more I go, okay, well, next show, I'm going to be a little more cognizant to try to use my big boy words and not, sound like a valley girl. But there's, things like that. And when you talk about a natural edit, that was something that I didn't do at first. I was so fixated on trying to make the best sounding show that I could do, that I didn't think about, like, what is it about a podcast that's so attractive? Is it the content? Is it the relationships? Like, what are you there for? So originally when we first started, I was cutting out all the silences. And a rule of thumb for me is, like, if it's a 2-hour show, it should take no more than double, no more than 4 hours to edit. 4-hour edit is a long, strenuous edit. Realistically, it should take the length of the show to edit it. Maybe a few extra minutes, but if I have to sit here and edit a 2-hour show for an additional 2 hours, we did something wrong, or we had a lot of interruptions. But I would go and I would say, okay, every time there was a pause more than 1 second, I'm going to cut that audio out, because surely that's going to stand out like a sore thumb. And then what happens is you kind of remove the natural cadence that you and your friends and your co-hosts have. And so at first I was a big stickler on that. And I was also a big stickler on noise reducers. Like, I wanted every bit of background noise completely out. And then you almost have a bit of a stale sounding show, and noise reducers are you can cut the ends of your words off. So something you'll learn about your speech is you might start into something hot and heavy, but then when you're finishing your word, you kind of taper off a little bit.
Yes.
And what I learned is like, if I used a strong noise reducer to get rid of like a background hiss or a buzz, or if your microphone's too close to your PC and your fan kicks on, then there's this background static, things like that. And or if someone's playing a video game or typing on their computer whenever you're recording, then you hear the click 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 click. But if you set a noise reducer at a higher decibel rate than what the noise you're producing, what you learn is you start cutting off your words. So where like you'll cut your S's out easy. So then it sounds like you're editing really hard, and that can actually be more disorienting. It could take you out of the show more so than just natural background noise. So dialing back on the editing has been something that I've learned for myself over the years, because I want the idea of a podcast is like supposed to be, at least in my mind, a couple friends hanging out, talking about their like interests. And the reason why I'm attracted to podcasts is because I want to hear people get excited about the things that I'm excited about. So whenever I found your show, I heard you're a guest on Trophy Horse, and I found Trophy Horse because I was Googling trophy podcasts. And that's how I found Trophy Horse. And so, and whenever I heard you on Trophy Horse, I listened to your show, and you're like, oh, wait a minute, you're making an entire show based on getting cheap platinums and just talking about how to get platinums. That's my jam. Like I was like, this guy made this show for me. Like this is, and so, like I want to hear you and your guests and your co-host talk about the things that I'm interested in. So I want to hear you guys talk about things like your two friends sitting in a room together, even though realistically you're all the way across the world.
Yeah. I mean, and that is one of the fantastic things, I think, of podcasting. But look, let's shift across to the music side. But just before we do, and I think you'll probably agree on this. I'm not sure. The last tip I would give is if you haven't done it for a while, if you are starting out, see if you can impose on somebody that does a lot of it, particularly someone on YouTube that does their own own videos or whatever. If it's trophies or whatever it is, or someone who speaks professionally, or at least semi-professionally regularly, because they're very easy to edit. I think you would agree, Darrell, that it's just easy. They're used to talking and they flow through. And what you'll realize, and what I've realized, I think, is that the people I find that are the very best at speaking in these type of formats are also the people that do editing themselves. Because I think it's tied up in one in the same, Darrell. I think if you do edit yourself, then you start to realize what does and doesn't work when you speak. As well.
Correct.
So I'm not sure, I'm sure you would agree with that overall. But look, let's move on to the music. So now, first off, Ninjaloot. What is the name? Sorry, well, no, what does it mean? What does the band's name mean? Where did it come from?
Okay, so Ninjaloot is actually a term used in the game World of Warcraft. And it's when you watch, it's the name of my band. I'm going to butcher what it means. But when you basically stealth, loot, steal, you know what I'm saying, gear in a game, whether it be a character who has died and hasn't been able to recover their gear, or if you're trying to, let's say you're in a stealth mission and you want to grab all the stuff without being seen. The term Ninjaloot is to stealth steal or loot gear in a game. And it derived from I was in a band years ago. I've been in bands my whole life, like just since I was 13 years old. In middle school, I would do like projects where I would play guitar with a group of friends, and we would write history projects. We would take songs by Green Day, and we would change the lyrics based on whatever project or whatever we had to do. For my 8th grade English class, we played some Creed covers as almost like a extra credit kind of show and tell-ish thing. But we had to take songs with deep meaning. We performed them, and then we had to explain what they were about. And so I'm not good. I just want to put that out there. If anyone listens to any of these shows and you go and you check out anything I'm a part of, I know I'm not good. You don't have to tell me. It's just something I love doing. Our band name is stupid. You don't have to tell me. We all agree. But it's just, it's something that we do and it's fun. And I was in a group with a couple guys, and I bought some gear. I bought a new guitar and a new amp. And he was like, one of the other guitar players was like, man, I'm gonna Ninjaloot your stuff when you're not looking. I was like, what? He's like, Ninjaloot, man, it's World of Warcraft. I was like, I've never played, and that was just kind of it. That was the consensus of that conversation. Years later, the band that I'm in now and I have been in for years, we were sitting around at dinner and we're trying to figure out like, what are we gonna call our band? Because naming a band is hard. That's like the hardest part. I think. Like, I'm sure when you were naming your show Push to Plat, that there was a lot of thought, and I don't know if you struggle the way we struggle, but like, naming something, branding something is really, really difficult, and you probably make it more complicated than it needs to be. But if you think about it, that's going to be the name for this project forever, or at least until you reboot it and rebrand it like we did. And so, we're sitting around and you talking about a band of 4 or 5 guys trying to agree on something when all of us are just huge goofballs. So we just couldn't come up with anything. And we had names like Colossal Butt Pirates. We had, gosh, what was some other? There was actually a band called Colossal Butt Muscles. And I think that was one. That was actually one of the names that one of us came up with. And then Butt Pirate was another one. So I was like, what if we just combine them? We could be the Colossal Butt Pirates, and it's like, you're not going to really call your band that, but we just couldn't be serious long enough to come up with it. And I was like, we had some serious names that were like a little pretentious and overthought. And it was like, oh, what if we named it this whole thing and blah, blah. Long story short, I was like, what if we just Ninjalooted somebody else's name, created our MySpace? All right, we're talking MySpace days. Yeah. So we create our MySpace with someone else's name, and then when we finally agree on something, and they're like, "What? What'd you say?" I was like, "Ninjaloot." Like take someone else's name, and they're like, "That's it. That's the name." I'm like, "That's a terrible name," but okay. And then the rest is history. That was it.
I like that. So what we might do, listeners and Darrell, if this is okay with you, because this is sort of what I do, so I know this is lovely for me, but perhaps less lovely for you, is I'd like to do like a little bit of a deep dive on your song, your recent released cover, if that is okay. What Child Is This? And then maybe touch on some of your back catalogue as well. So I've got some questions. Anything you don't want to answer, that's of course fine. We'll move on. But the first thing I wanted to ask, so this is it been about, just judging from your SoundCloud page there, has it been about sort of 9 years since you've recorded something, or in that time frame?
Yes. So with our SoundCloud, earlier this year, I went and kind of added the back catalog. I think we had like 4 or 5 songs on there. We're the worst promoters of ourselves like ever. And we were really terrible about stopping playing shows to actually go into a studio and do really well produced recordings. So we started off really hot and heavy. Like we played hundreds of shows, shared the stage with all these different huge bands that we loved. I mean, I don't know if you've ever heard of the group Flyleaf, a rock band with a female singer. They were huge. And, years ago, we got to play with them all over the radio, all over MTV, things like that. We got to open up for POD. They've done songs for ESPN. They're one of the biggest, rock bands in the late 90s, early 2000s era. I mean, we've the guitar player from Korn, he had another band called Love and Death. We got to open up for them. I mean, we got to share the stage with really big gospel artist named Canton Jones, and we're a metal band, like lots of screaming, lots of heavy deep tune guitar work. We're not the most we're not the prettiest dudes to look at either, so it's one of those things to where we got to experience a lot of things and we didn't fit in most places that we went, but for whatever reason we continue to get opportunities. So because we loved playing live so much, and we played so many shows in the 6.5 years that we were, together and active, we didn't record much. We would do, a 5-song EP, and it would just be scratch tracks, demos, and I don't know. I mean, I know you've done some music production and you do a lot of, mixing and re-orchestrating of tracks, but like essentially the first take is not the good one. And we would pay for studio time. We'd go set up in a studio and we'd just do like a live run through. And then we might go in there and edit the obvious mistakes. And then that's it. And we would take that recording, we'd mass produce it, and then we'd go back on the road rather than spend the 6-8 months to a year that you really should spend to track and retrack and mix and master. And, we just couldn't, we were too ADD. We just had to go. So yeah, to answer your question, the last actual EP that we recorded is called Be Still. And what we did was we were able to rent out a space in a church, like a wasn't, I think it might've been a youth center. But essentially we were able to grab the space for the day, and we set up a bunch of recording gear and all of our live gear, and we mic'd it up, ran through our songs. We actually sent it off to a studio in Nashville to be mixed and mastered. And what we got back was actually, in my opinion, worse than what we could have done ourselves. We were very unhappy with it. But, again, in the nature and this of just not stopping, we just kept going. Like, oh, well, this sucks, but you get the idea. We keep going. And so yeah, it's been a while since we've produced any music.
That's not an uncommon thing, though, because one of the things that amazes me, we've both been around this industry for a long, long time, is that 10 years ago, to record something, to hire a studio space, like you're $10,000 a day upwards, for a professional studio. And that's just it. And the problem is, as you say, it's not one day. Like if you can put a record down in 4 or 5 days, that's impressive, And these big groups, they are recording for weeks and weeks, but the companies, picking up the expenses, well, that's another story, another topic for later perhaps, but it's not feasible for the average band to record in that time. And this idea of creativity, especially for the music that you play, and this is what I wanted to ask, a lot of it becomes, a lot of songs are written in the studio, or they're altered and arranged in the studio. They're not necessarily, created, weeks and weeks beforehand. So there's massive constraints on what you can do. Whereas now, the technologies we've, already talked about with editing, it's so much better now that you can do it yourself to a large degree. But so I can understand that. But what I wanted to ask, and we'll go back through some of the older stuff first, but you started with a cover. So What Child Is This? And if it's okay, I'll link it in the show notes as well. So people can.
Absolutely.
How did you settle on that one then to record it? How did that come about?
So, and like just anything that I do, I'm going to give a lot of backstory, probably more than you ask for, but you kind of signed up for that when you asked me on the show.
It's all right.
So we've been estranged as a group for since 2013. So you're talking another 6 years. So as long as we were together as a live band, we have been apart. Everyone had kids, got married. Our drummer actually tours with a band called Sear, and it's a Irish folk or Scottish folk band, some kind of folk band. But he does drum demos and plays for these huge places. The dude's just astronomical. He's so talented. It's just ridiculous. And so he's just, as soon as we landed the plane and, kind of took our time off, he just kept going. So we've sat back for years, all of us in different positions of life, wishing that we were together, but everyone's making these excuses saying, oh, well, this guy can't because of what he's doing now. And this guy can't because of what he's doing now. And then when in reality, we all were longing to just get back together, So early last year, 2019, I heard 2 of the guys were getting together for dinner. I was like, hey, you mind if I tag along? My wife's been telling me that I really need to make friends. And I don't get out, I don't do anything. And so I was like, what better way to get out and do something is to actually go out with my old bandmates. And they're like, yeah, absolutely. So we all go out to dinner, and just kind of put the cards out there. I was like, dude, I gotta be honest, I'm super jealous that you're touring and you're doing all this stuff, and these places are flying you out for weeks at a time and putting you up in these great hotels, and you're just getting to go do all these huge festivals. And then the other guy is like, he's singing in a church now, and he's a worship leader, and like he's doing all this stuff. And it's like, you didn't sing when we were all together, you screamed, which is cool. That's what we were into, but like now he went from being our drummer to our vocalist, doing all these guttural lows and stuff. And then he picked up a guitar. Dude plays guitar very well. He's really good. There's really nothing he can't do. I was like, and here I am sitting back podcasting about video games. I'm like, where did I go wrong here? And so we're all laughing and cutting up. And then, our drummer, he was like, I got to be honest, guys. Yeah, you see me posting all these pictures of all these places I've gone and all these things I'm doing. He goes, but you know what I want? Is I want us to get our little local metal band back together. He's like, and play aggressive, passionate music. And like you said before, like these, like normally a song is written or arranged in the studio, and when in his music, that's exactly how it is like essentially one person writes all the music and then gives it to the band members, and then they kind of arrange their pieces together. They pay, like you said, $10,000 to start going into a studio, and then they have someone else kind of mix and master their stuff. And he said, it's just not challenging. I'm not, as fun as it is and as nice as it is, I'm not passionate about that. I'm passionate about what we were doing, how goofy we look doing it. And so I was like, bro, let's do this. So, we kind of like early last year, we were like, let's kind of get the thing going again. Let's kind of see where it goes. And then right around, November or so, I'm putting up the Christmas tree and I'm kind of hanging out with my wife, and she's like, let's listen to Christmas songs. And I'm like, okay, cool. But like, can we listen to something cool? Like let's listen to something exciting. I don't want to hear Mariah Carey for the 500,000th time, So I just went on Spotify and I typed in metal Christmas songs, and then found this awesome playlist of all these Greensleeves Christmas songs just done by rock groups. Some of them heavier than others. And I text all the guys. I said, hey, a few months ago, we talked about doing this thing and getting together and writing an album. Like, how do you think we could do an acoustic song, and like maybe throw a little bit of like a breakdown, some heavy stuff at the very end of it? And everyone immediately was like, yes, absolutely. I was like, you think we can do it by Christmas? They're like, oh, absolutely. And I said, well, what do you guys want to do? And two of the guys, they've sang in churches for years. They're like, oh man, dude, we do 100 of these songs a year. Let's do What Child? And I was like, sure. I was like, I mean, I like that song just fine. And so we got together, we jammed it out one night. You know what I'm saying? Sent the tracks to the drummer. He kind of added his stuff to it. They changed some pieces up, sent it back to me. I recorded my parts, kind of volleyed it back and forth, and then went through the whole process to have it released, which is, it took longer than I expected. So we didn't get it out on Christmas Day like we wanted. It was actually like the 30th or 31st. But what we wanted to do was we wanted to pick a song that was completely unlike anything you ever heard us do before. We'd never done a cover. That was like a rule when we started our band. It was like, we're not going to do any covers. We want to write original music. We're not going to write your traditional verse chorus style music either. We're going to write progressive music. So essentially, if you listen back to our songs, the structure is there. There's verses, what I'm saying? There's riffs, and then there's breakdowns where we take and we chop the momentum up and we play really heavy, deep palm muted parts. And then we go into another series of progressive riffs, and then we do a breakdown again. And so essentially that was our structure, but we didn't really have like repeating verses and choruses. And it kind of served us well, at the time, because we wrote our music together in a group. Like we would just have these jam sessions, and it would be, let's just play. And what's going to make people move? What's going to make people dance at the show? And that was the foundation of all of the songs we wrote. So when we get back together, now we're all in our 30s, we're grown, and we're like, okay, we're grown-ish. I mean, that's, So we're like, let's, yeah, I was like, let's do something that no one would expect. Let's do a cover of an acoustic song written in the 1800s. And then we'll throw a little bit of our flair and style at the end of it, but let's actually produce it and make it sound good. Because to kind of tie all this together, the thing that the driving, I guess, factor in all this is we never did a good sounding record. And the thing is like, I've played hundreds of shows. I've toured and done 5 and 6 day stretches, and we've slept on floors, and we've slept in vans, and we've played multiple shows a night, and we've played with big bands, we've played with small bands, we've played in front of tens of people, we've played in front of thousands of people. We've played up and down the coast of the United States and into the Midwest. We've played these huge festivals, and we never signed to a label, even though we were offered one deal, and we took a really crappy promotional deal, but we never made it, quote unquote, made it, and we never recorded a full length, album. So it was like, are we ready to get back into the shows? Probably not. Not until we're done with the album. But it's like, what is the one thing that everyone is like, we have unfinished business? We're gonna put out a freaking record. And hopefully it'll be good, because if you want my opinion, you go back and listen to our songs. There's some good stuff here and there, but for the most part, it's not great. Like if you watch the handful of YouTube videos that are out there of us, they're not great. I don't think we did a good job we didn't put our best foot forward for a digital footprint that would be there once we're gone. There's a couple of crappy cell phone videos out there, and then like a couple really like not well produced music videos that we tried, and then low sounding, not good recordings. So, our biggest thing was you couldn't Google my band right now, and there's no evidence to show you what we really were doing and what these shows were really like. Like it's just not there. But like, if the videos don't support what we saw and what we did over the years, at least one good sounding record will. And so that's the goal. That's kind of what we're doing.
Yeah. I like that. Because the funniest thing about music is it's so effervescent. Like it's of the moment. So, it's like trying to explain your song to somebody when you can't play it for them. It's impossible, or the atmosphere or anything else. And, for non-musician or whatever, I mean, it's the equivalent of basically your life's work. You need a physical representation, I think, as well. But often, as you say, we don't realize that till much later. So I think it's wonderful that you're in the position to go ahead and create that. But what I want to ask, because one of the things that interests me with music in particular, and I do a bit of work with some students, older students and tertiary students, and one of the things that we try to teach or impart on them that is that there is, and I know it sounds dreadful, but there is nothing new. Music is very predictable. And like, there's this aha moment in students, I find, and adults and well, any age, I suppose, where they turn to you and you go, you can stop it. I know what's going to come next. I know how this is going to go. I can sing you the next part, yet I've never heard it. And, you might say, well, that's ridiculous. But the more you immerse yourself in more music of a particular styles, that's very, very true. So what interests me in artists is when they deviate from established forms or whatever else, as you say. Now, I'm not sure the correct term for this, because this again is moving out of my comfort zone in music. Perhaps you can tell me. I know you are heavily influenced by Christian practice, Christian music as well. And I noticed that, like, going back to your 2010 EP that you talked about, the Be Still, you actually have a speaking track there, gospel there. So this has been a long time influence. But what interests me particularly in this What Child Is This, which again, it's a hymn of sorts, I suppose, this carol, is that it starts off, and I mean, I don't need to analyze it because you did such a good job yourself, I feel, but it does start off very traditionally or whatever else, then you bring in some electric guitar, you're blocking the chords or whatever with the voice line or whatever else. And then there's but the turning point, and what surprised me is, because I wasn't familiar with your music until you sent me the link to this, 3/4 of the way through or so, you introduced the screaming or whatever else. And it's not, when I first listened to it, and there's no judgment here, this is a poor reflection on myself, it's not the music that I listen to. So immediately I was like, oh, I didn't expect that or whatever else. And then on subsequent listens, I realized, and this is like, look, I'm familiar with screamo, I'm familiar with German death metal. I've covered a lot of this stuff in the past. Some of it has value, some of it doesn't, I feel, but each their own. But I noticed that it was harmonizing against the vocals or whatever else. It wasn't just there for no reason. So and then I went back and I listened to your stuff recently, and I noticed that, this has been a trend for you guys, right back from even in 2006, you're Stronger Than This EP. So, I mean, this is almost your structure, isn't it? That you start off and you layer it up and then it comes in eventually. So what do you call this style? Like, what is this overall? Because I'm sure there's a word for it. I'm just, ignorant and I don't know it.
Well, I guess the blanketing term would just be metal.
Yeah, but I think that's a cop-out. That's a very generic.
It is, and the thing is, if you listen to the different EPs, I have always been very heavy into genre blending. So,
Hmm.
like our first EP, "Strung on This," was influenced by what they call metal core, and it would be, you know, heavy rock, you know, deep tuned guitar, but it still had your melodies and still had some of your singing, but then it had just the chunky, the palm muted breakdowns. And then from there, we got into Beards and Bellies, which was us getting a little more silly with it. And then that one, we really got into the high low harmonies or, layering of the vocals. And we started changing instead of going for like singing because the guy who was our vocalist at the time, his strong suit was not singing. It was this whiny, like, I don't know what you would call that style, but it was just very like whiny lead into a passionate scream. And we just, I don't know, we kind of sped things up a little bit. And then the Be Still EP was us leaning more into heavy hardcore is what you'd call it, or getting towards what they call deathcore, which is just really drop tuned 7-string guitars, chunkier riffs, a much faster pace when it comes to cadence and the drum patterns. And then we've always been interested in the different styles and the different influences of metal and rock. So I always try to borrow things that were inspiring to me. So in the first EP, we had a little bit of singing. As a matter of fact, the guy singing for us at the time, he was all-state tenor in Rhode Island, and that was some pitchy hot mess for this guy to have. Like, he had like acclimates of how good of a singer he was. And then when we did our, granted, it was supposed to be quote scratch tracks. It was pretty bad. But either way, what I'm saying, we've always tried to incorporate that stuff, and then also kind of stay with the growing trends in the quote metal genre. But the thing that ties it all together is the breakdowns. It's the building up to a certain point and then just the drop. In EDM, like dubstep and
Hmm.
dance music, so that it's all hinged on taking you on a roller coaster, just up, 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 stop, and then boom, the drop. And again, it's our our influence was making people move while we're on stage. Just getting the adrenaline going and getting the bodies slamming into each other, jumping around, just going nuts. And that was like the driving force into, the progression of the songs.
Yeah, that's a good answer, because one of the things, like, it doesn't matter the style of music you're delving into or whatever. It always fascinates me because as you've alluded to, I'm more on the analytical side now or whatever. But one of the things that is most interesting is why someone chooses to do something at a particular time in a song. And quite often that's the difference between them being, interesting to listen to and them not being interesting to listen to. And then from that perspective, then how do you know when to do something? Whether as you say, you drop in certain things or whatever else, you modulate, you change your key, whatever else, you thicken the electronics, whatever. There's a choice made at some point that changes the direction of the song, and that always interests me. So I suppose what I'm interested now in is, you've been doing this for a long time. Has your and you sort of alluded to it as you've explained it, but has your view, because as I said, I think your structure is loosely similar across the years, but has your view changed in music from what you know now? Are you pursuing like a different sound, I suppose, is what I'm driving at? Or are you still comfortable and immersed in that original sound that you had back in 2006?
Yeah, I think we've definitely matured in taste and as songwriters. So again, we're very intentional in what we've done over the years,
Hmm.
um, but yet we've always been attracted to a good chorus, something that people can sing along to. And
Mhm.
so, What Child was a lot of things. It was us breaking our own rules. It was giving whereas you were surprised when the drop came,
Mm.
at 99.9% of the people
The
listening
other way
to the
around.
song, it was the other way around. I was like, whoa, wait a
Yeah.
second. You guys don't do this. And when you did do it, you didn't start like that. Um, So it was just kind of us breaking our own mold as, adults. And, will we do more of that? Absolutely. The next song coming out is a return to form. Uh, you know, the next song we've already put out little feelers on Facebook and stuff is we wrote a song. It was on our Be Still, not Be Still, excuse me, it was on our Stronger on This EP called Everybody's Breakdown. And essentially Everybody's Breakdown was just a chuggy breakdown, open palm riffs with very little accent notes throughout, to differentiate between the verses and the choruses. But it was just supposed to be something fun to play to end our set. And the lyrics were comprised of all of the negative things that people had said to us when we decided we were going to be a band, and when we decided we were going to have Christian influence in our band. All of us have a very similar like mindset and stand when it comes to religion and faith. And that was one of the things that when we got together, it was like I'd been to hundreds of shows. I took my wife and I would go to shows. We go see all these bands, and I just never enjoyed when people get on stage and just say the most vulgar, nasty things they can say just because they're on stage with a microphone. Like, if you're going to be vulgar with an intention. You know what I'm saying? If you're just going to get on stage and then tie every single sentence together with like 7 F words, like what is the substance there? It's like, I don't know. It's just one of those things where I was like, man, if I ever got the opportunity to be on stage, I would want our representation to be, something that actually means something. Even if you didn't necessarily agree with us on a religious standpoint, just to be a little more moral and a little more behaved, which is a bit of a stark contrast to the lowbrow humor we use on our podcast. But it was just, It's one of those things where we all had the same mindset. It's like, how about this? How about our goal is to be on stage and not be douchebags? How about our goal is to be on stage and when we write our songs, let's not write just garbage. Let's actually put things with some substance to it, And then Everybody's Breakdown was the culmination of all the dumb stuff people had said to us. And one of the lines is he opens up with I've got your box. And that was just a dumb line that he threw out there in the studio because this dude, we were out to eat one night, and this waiter was just being super rude to one of our guitar players, like borderline aggressive, like punking him out, like I'd be like, hey bro, can I get a water? Sure, man. And the other guy would be like, hey man, can I get another order of chicken wings? Sure, man. This guy, Justin, would be like, hey man, can I blah, blah, blah? And he would be like, just rude to him. And he was like, hey man, can I get a box? He goes, yeah, I got your box. It was just a complete, just different way. Like he spoke to this guy. And so we're all goofing off and we're writing songs or whatever. And then like, I was like, all right, count us down into this digga, 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 digga. And then so the vocalist is like, it screams, I've got your box. And then we all start laughing. We're playing the song. And he just starts saying all these ridiculous things that people have said to us. So that being said, we've opened it up to, hey, we're going to do a re-release of that song, and we're going to add some lines from the community. And so we're experimenting with a Facebook group for the band. And so I was like, let's open it up in there and let's let people write in whatever dumb things that people said to kind of hold them down. Because if it's Everybody's Breakdown, it needs to include things that apply to everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh, CJ, some of the responses have been hilarious. Just the dumb stuff people write in, And so, again, kind of landing the plane on it. Like there'll be a return to form. You're going to hear the aggressive, progressive style of the music, but we've got, I think 12 or 13 demos lined out right now. And I'd say 90% of them have a verse chorus structure, where we want to give you something to sing along with. Not everybody likes the screaming. I understand it metal. And then our brand of metal is a sub genre of a smaller genre of music than, what's popular. So we're already appealing to a small amount of people. And then when you predominantly scream and you play really aggressive, you're even going to get less of your quote unquote listener base, your fan base that you could have. So one of the things we want to do is we want to add some choruses. We want to give you something to sing along to, we want to give you something to remember, because now the music isn't written to make you move on while we're on stage. Now the music is being written because we want it to last. You know what I'm saying? Once we're done, once we're old and
Yeah.
and unable to strum our guitars anymore, this is almost our legacy, quote unquote.
Yes. Yeah. Now, look, these sort of short answer questions, but these are the things that I've noticed, in my time with music. Music and musicians breed narcissism. They go hand in hand, I feel, particularly in bands. Does the Christian influence negate this narcissism, or are there people that have to have their own way in the Ninjaloot?
I think that
Would you prefer not to answer that?
no, dude, I'll answer anything you throw at me. I think that it's really difficult, and the
It
narcissism
is,
that comes with
isn't
being
it?
a musician. I'll put it to you like this: here's just some. We've got some older members who haven't necessarily been on board with us all the time, and we kind of open things up to them. And I knew opening it up to them, it's going to be its own set of problems. We got some guys who they're not gonna play 7-string guitars, and they're not gonna drop their tuning to A, and that's my bread and butter. That's where I live, you know.
Yes.
And then
And
we've got some guys who they want to reinvent the wheel every time you talk about music, And
mm,
I think that's cool. I'm glad you're excited and you want to be creative, but like this isn't about how technical you can write something or how much better you've progressed as a musician. Let's just write good songs, like we're not making people move anymore, and again, I say that because that was the focus. It was like, oh man, you and you're talking about, when do you do this? When do you do this? Well, we make all those decisions based on, well, how are they going to respond to it? Like, here's this riff I wrote, right? Okay, where do we go from there? Okay, well, we kind of need to be, let's go into this. Let's go into this. How many riffs have we written? Oh, breakdown time. And it's very, it was very much written like, okay, people have heard 30 seconds of music. Now let's give them something to mosh to.
yeah, no, I can understand. I think alluding back to that, how do you do this or where do you do this? I think one of the funniest things is you say, well, why did you go up in this line? Why did you do this here? And so you can dump all the theory in the world, and then they look at the next phrase and then go, well, you went up again, but you didn't have any of that theory behind it. Why did you do it this time? I don't know. I just felt like it, and I think that's the thing with music. It is. It's just is as you say. It's a spontaneous. I felt like it, so why not? It works, doesn't it? Well, yeah, I suppose. But it's an interesting thing. Now, the other thing I wanted to ask you is, the famous rock thing. Learn these 3 chords and you will go far. So, do you? I don't know if you prescribe to that or not, but how much electronic manipulation in your edit? Again, if you feel comfortable, do you guys use? Is that a big thing to manipulate the sound, or is it fairly natural in its recording? I suppose.
No, yeah, everything's pretty natural. I mean, everything we did, aside from cleaning it up a little bit, just so that you can actually hear. Like for me, my rig has always been almost maxed out. Like, let's just turn it up,
Yeah.
turn the lows up. Because when I hit those palm mutes, I want you to feel it. I want the speakers to vibrate as if we just drop bass. I want the crunch when I'm pinching a harmonic. I want it to squeal and I want it to be ear piercing. But with that comes a lot of static and background noise. So, as far as like tracks currently and tracks in the past, the majority of the edit just goes into cleaning it up so you can actually hear the difference in the notes.
Okay. Now, I just want to ask something. I want to look behind the curtain here. I would agree your drummer is fantastic from what I've listened to, but I want to ask you something uh, about him here. Does he use a drum pad
He does.
in your What Child Is This song?
No, he doesn't. He doesn't use a drum pad.
Ooh,
He doesn't
impressive.
he doesn't trigger his drums either. So
Okay,
ev-
impressive.
everything
Yeah.
is raw. As a matter of fact, the original drum tracks for the song that we've already released and the songs that we're editing right now, he went back and re-recorded and remixed them because he felt like they sounded too triggered.
Yeah.
He doesn't
Yeah.
want
That's
any.
impressive, then.
Oh, he is
Yeah.
something else.
It's top notch. Sorry, I know some musicians don't like to talk about that. We're getting in the weeds here, listeners. I apologize. But some of the work I do, I get sent MIDI files with a lot of VST, virtual instruments, and you can tell the drum loops from a mile away. Sometimes you even hear the same one between different songs, which is fantastic. So they don't even try and hide it.
Oh,
but
yeah.
it's very hard with a high quality drummer. It's very hard to tell sometimes what is and isn't triggered. So that's impressive. No, you'll have to pass on my love for that. I liked it. Good.
Oh, absolutely. He's by far, he's the most talented one among
You're
us.
very
Like,
humble.
I would definitely say I am the least talented, and that he's the most talented. Trey, the vocalist, I would say he is a jack of all trades, and he's not quite mastered them all, but he's very close. Because that guy, he used to be our drummer, and what the chemistry we shared was, I can write riffs all day long. They might not be great, but I never run out of ideas. I never experience writer's block. I'll write you a riff right now. It might not be good, but I've always got something. Trey can put a beat to anything. So the two of us would get in a room, and writing was always a breeze because the dude, he's the yin for my yang. When he took over the vocals, we were very worried that we weren't going to find a drummer that we could write with. And Luis, he actually recorded, mixed he did some of our EPs. He did the Holy Palooza demo, some of it. And then he did the Be Still, he did Beards and Bellies and Be Still. And now he's doing all his, obviously you can hear the difference in his production because he's doing the final stuff now. So, Luis was our producer essentially. And then now he's our full-time member. So.
Oh, that's fascinating. Look, I'm gonna thank you for that because I know we've deviated a long way from games, but it's been fascinating to me. I love talking to musicians about their music, their style, and what goes into it. I learn so much. So I do really appreciate that, Darrell. And as I said, I know we got off the general, as you say, two old guys talking about video games, but I think it's allowable for us. And if you made it this far, listeners, I hope you enjoyed it. It's just something different. Yeah. Why not? Why not? Now, Darrell, we need to move across very quickly to the Push to Platinum community shoutouts because, these people have been busy earning plats. I noticed neither of us are here, but that's okay. There's plenty of other people. So we'll shoot through. If you have a comment about the game, please feel free to share. Our first one today, Beastie Soldier, number 99, the wonderful Hoggy 2 NA.
Oh man, that's a 10 out of 10 right there.
It is. It's definitely wonderful. I would agree. And we still don't know what happened to the original Hoggy, but it's out there somewhere. I don't know. It's true. Eigenspace, Trails. I always make this mistake, and I know that our friend JT is just there, like gritting his teeth. He'll choke himself out one day.
Right.
No. But that's right. So Trails of Cold Steel 3. I hope it is Trails now, not Trials. But anyway, I'm going to go with that. Trails of Cold Steel 3. 160 hours, first plat of 2020. And look, I reached out to Eigen about something else, and she told me that this was a real war of attrition because the game she felt was not amazing. So congratulations. But she needed to find out how it finished, and now she knows. So excellent. Darrell, now this is I don't know if you've played this one, Darrell. You'll probably grit your teeth at this. Our guest last week, Freddy, he almost necked himself when he played this. The East Side, number 618, Avicii Invector, first plat of 2020. Have you played this tribute to the DJ Mastermind? No,
not yet.
Yes, I don't know if you like that type of music or not, but it's not bad. It's not bad. The game is not bad either. For what it is, 619, The Outer Worlds, amazing game if you like games like Fallout. Also, Supernova can be done in 25 to 30 minutes. Very easy, so don't be scared. It's good that we've found our clientele, isn't it? The hardest trophy in the game, and he tells everyone how to do it in 30 minutes. Excellent, good. And then we come to Ed the Shed, which is one of my favorite names in the group. Ed the Shed 2014. He and Sleepy Nachos, I think they're great. Great names. But anyway, number 66, Raging Loop. Well, look, Tricky will be interested in this. This is a lovely VN. Quick and easy platinum when using a guide. Fantastic. It's very quick. I think there's only like a handful of decisions. So there's definitely a plus one there for.
So instead of having multiple pieces of paper, he can have one piece of paper folded up.
He may look. He's so skilled now. He may even do it without the paper. He might just feel it. I don't know. So and look, if you're looking for another one, so the handout stretched with pink hair, I would recommend it. And now I've told you what happens, so you don't even need to worry. Scottish Noob, number 334, Death Stranding. Oh, now we should have a sidebar. You didn't mention Death Stranding once today, so does that mean you're just not into it? what's going on?
I actually really like it. I just it's one of those games where I don't want to have any distractions. I want to do a couple missions at a time, and like this is just a busy week, so I plan on playing it, but I definitely won't play it this week or this weekend. It'll have to be in the coming weeks, and then we'll do a deep dive on it one day.
Well, that's a very diplomatic answer, because I decided one of my New Year's resolutions for 2020 was I was going to limit the bullshit in my life. And that is clearly a giant piece of bullshit. So this morning, I'm on a purge as well, Darrell. We won't go into this, but I'm getting rid of shit because I have too much stuff and just useless stuff as well. It's ridiculous. So anyway, I took a ton of games down to get rid of them or whatever else. And Death Stranding was in that pile. And I felt liberated. Passing. And the guy said, "You don't want to keep it?" I said, "Definitely not." And instead, what I got, which is an even more ridiculous thing, is Dragon Ball Z Crack One Off. So I'm looking forward to that sitting on the shelf. But our friend Yield, he told us it's a great game. So that'll be interesting to see if that ever goes in the system. Speaking of I Yield, he's found us. I Yield to No One, the co-host of Trophy Horse, a fantastic co-host. His Medieval, his first plat for 2020. So that's a solid plat. I know he doesn't fuck around with bullshit games. So that's well done, sir.
That's true. It's very admirable of him.
It is very admirable. I don't think he'll listen this far. I mean, that would be a massive effort to get to this point to hear that. But I'll tell him. Well, either of us can tell him the next time we're on the show. We did give him a shout out, and therefore your trophies should be always read out from now on. Seeing he did.
That's right.
We did him the courtesy. So look, I think we've come to a conclusion of sorts. I have a feeling we could go on forever, Darrell, on these topics today, but we probably shouldn't. We should respect somebody's time, not our own, but somebody's, and draw a line there. So as always, sir, thank you so much for giving your time today. I really appreciate it.
Oh wow, thanks for having me, CJ, and I really do look forward to the flip side of this conversation. So next time I want to hear about your musical background in depth.
Excellent. Well, look, I'm sure I'll terrify you in all different ways to the way your music's terrified me. No, only, are you interested in a perfect cadence? I can walk you through it. But anyway, look, we'll save that. We'll save that for next time, listeners. So look, have a wonderful week. I know the games are starting to pick up. I know it's still a bit slow, but I'm sure you have massive back and front logs to take care of in the meantime. If you feel like being part of a community, if you want to reach out, even if it is over the internet, please think about joining the Backlog Beatdown. And the best way to do that would be to go onto the Facebook group. Is that right, Darrell, to get started?
Yeah, we've got an open group for the Backlog Beatdown, so anyone can go on there and just jump on in and post what you're doing.
And the wrap-up spiel, we're getting to the end. Push2Plat can be found on all good podcast providers. If you'd like to reach out to us, please feel free to do so. We are on Twitter at push2plat, push2plat on Twitter, or you can email us at push2plat@gmail.com. We also have a Discord. If you want to jump in and say hi, please feel free to do so. It is in the show notes. While I'm saying this, Darrell, I keep thinking of you accusing another host from another show about doing it too fast and doing it without any interest at all. So I'm very conscious of that. I try to keep my voice deadpan now and as uninterested as possible. But it is what it is. So thank you again, Darrell. Thank you, listeners. Have a wonderful week. We will catch you next week back to relatively normal.
So bring him incense, gold and myrrh, compare